Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the show, the RR Show, the show your mother warned you about, but also the best show on the internet according to my mother and myself. It may be coming up to Christmas, but this one's going to be a spooky one for those dark evenings. So grab a comfort blanket, grab your tea and your popcorn, and come with me as we jump into some stories from r/LetsNotMeet. Our first story is from Hiccups Capone. Time I almost got kidnapped. Murdered? ? This happened when I was in high school. Long ago. My mum just recently found the paperwork about it when she cleaned out her office upon retiring from the police department. I remember being upset and scared when it happened, but reading the details as an adult, it sounded even worse than I remembered it. I was 17, female, working at a flower and gift shop. It's nighttime. A man comes in, short, overweight, balding, 40s, creepy. He tells me about how he needs an apology gift for his girlfriend, so I offer a bouquet, obviously. It's a flower shop. He says she doesn't like flowers because they die. This was the first weird thing as he came into a flower shop. Then he goes into details about how he hit her, and asks me if I think he was right to do so. This was long ago, so I don't remember exactly what I said, but it was something along the lines of, "Not if you want her to continue being your girlfriend." He then tells me what a great job I'm doing, and asks me when I get off work. I dodge answering, and he leaves. Nothing for 6 months. Then, right before Valentine's Day, he walks in the door 1 minute before closing. It was dark, and from the outside it looked like I was working alone as my co-worker, about 40 female, was in the bathroom. Instinctively, I felt like a predator had just entered the room. You know when something isn't right and everything felt not right? I then notice he has a tarnished revolver tucked into the front of his windbreaker, which is halfway unzipped. It was obvious he wanted it seen. I quickly scribbled a note to my co-worker that says he has a gun and handed it to her when she came out of the bathroom. She calmly walked to the phone and looked at me wordlessly, asking if she should call the cops. I shook my head no, as I felt it would escalate the situation. God forbid he heard the police coming and took us hostage or something. I was just going to try and act as calm and as normal as I could, and hopefully not tip the situation into something more dangerous. He spends 15 minutes wandering around what was a fairly small shop. In retrospect, he was probably waiting to see if my co-worker would leave, as it was now well past closing. Finally, he places an order for pickup on Valentine's Day, which gives me his name and info that I'm going to put in the police report I am sure as hell about to file. He buys a card and pulls out a wad of $100 bills, which he slowly thumbs through as though looking for the right one with which to pay for his $40 order. I asked him if he wants a bag, as it wouldn't be very inconspicuous if he just showed up at home with Valentine's cards. He replied, "No, I don't feel like being inconspicuous tonight," which seemed like an obvious reference to the gun hanging out of his coat. He leaves. We quickly lock the door and watch him sit in his truck outside. We were not about to exit the shop until he was gone. Finally, he pulls out of the parking spot and moves to another spot further away and continues to just sit there. I don't know how long we waited, but he finally left. I called my mum, crying. She called the police, who came to the shop the next day to take a report. I told my best friend at the time what happened. She told her mother. Her mother happened to work with the man and informed security at her job. She said he was very weird, creepy, and liked to talk about weapons a lot. Security at his job, it's a large company with government contracts and things having to deal with tech and security, etc., pulled him into an office and questioned him about it. He claimed it was a glove in his pocket, not a revolver. The police were pissed that his company made contact with him about it before they did, and he successfully dodged the cops' multiple calls and visits to his apartment. My mum, much to my teen fury at the time, made me quit my job, which was devastating as I loved it there. In retrospect, totally the right call. Dude came in on Valentine's Day and picked up his order. I never saw him again. Right, well, our next one is in from Christaboo14, and it's simply titled Mr. Jim. When I was 14, I was asked to babysit my 3 younger cousins aged 8, 4, and 1 in an extremely rural mountainous part of Pennsylvania. My aunt and uncle had a wedding to go to over an hour away and wouldn't be back until very late. Their house was situated on a steep mountainside. Their back deck had a 15-foot drop onto a rocky hill below leading down to a river. Their closest neighbor were about half a mile away. The closest main road was a mile away, and at night there were no lights to be seen anywhere around them. Basically, it was in the middle of nowhere, and you'd have to know where you're going to get there. You don't just accidentally end up there. My aunt and uncle left us with some pizza and their cell phone number next to their landline. This was early 2000s and I didn't have a cell phone, but even if I did, I wouldn't get reception there anyway, and headed out. The baby was already asleep. The 4-year-old wasn't feeling well and was quietly watching TV in the living room as he dozed off, and the 8-year-old was playing Guitar Hero with me up in the loft. The loft overlooked the living room to the left, where I could keep an eye on the 4-year-old, and there was a huge window that overlooked the driveway to the right. This description of the driveway is an important detail to the story. The road that led to their house ran straight into their forked driveway. It was a dead-end road. Their house was as far as you could go. Go to the left driveway, there was a large open carport. That's where my aunt and uncle and anyone who ever visited parked. The right driveway led down a very short but very steep hill to a large, leveled-out area and ended against the garage door that opened to the basement of the house. It was never used as a garage, but served as my uncle's man cave, where he spent most of his time. Right beside the garage door, a normal door with a window so you could see right in. But this driveway was exclusively used by the kids as a play area because it was the only flat, yard-like area on the property, and being on a mountainside, there isn't much room to safely play otherwise. No cars ever drove down here, ever. There are too many toys and bikes in the way, and friends and family knew this. It was about 10 p.m, pitch black outside, no moon to illuminate the area either. My cousin and I are still playing Guitar Hero when headlights caught the corner of my eye. And not my aunt's minivan headlights, huge truck headlights with those roof lights you often see on Jeeps or other, off-road trucks. Not only that, the truck was going down the right driveway, the kids' play area. This was not my aunt and uncle. This was not anyone they knew. Panic and dread filled my body. I was a small teenage girl alone in an isolated house on a mountain at night with 3 children in my care. In a terrified voice, I asked my cousin, "Who's that? Jake? Do you know whose truck that is?" And then he looked panicked. "No, I've never seen that truck before," he replied. I quickly ushered him downstairs, still unsure of what to do, but the 2 little ones were sleeping down there and I wanted to make sure they were safe. I checked on the baby and then grabbed the phone to call 911, and then I started to hear the metal garage door being shaken violently. No one ever opened that garage door. More panic fills me. I hear them trying the door beside it. The metal doorknob jingling. No one was actually knocking. It's not like they were checking to see if my uncle was down there. Plus, the lights were out. It was dark down there. They knew no one was down there. They were definitely breaking in. The door leads to the basement steps, and it was right next to the phone, so I could clearly hear all of this going on. I quickly turned the little lock on the doorknob just in case they did make it into the basement. My heart was practically jumping out of my chest. I'm talking to the 911 dispatcher as my 8-year-old cousin clings to my arm. The operator's calm and trying to calm me, but I knew it would be at least 30 minutes until a police officer could get up here, assuming that they didn't get totally lost on this mountainside in the pitch dark. I just keep thinking, oh, we're fucked, we're dead, this is how I die. The operator asked for the number my aunt and uncle left me so she could have another dispatcher call them to let them know the situation. I turned around to grab the paper with the number on it, and to my absolute horror, I see a man peering in the large sliding glass door. A huge, burly, what had to be 6'4" man with long scraggly hair and a big red bushy beard. And what made it worse was he's grinning at me. Grinning in a way that still scares me to this day. Meanwhile, I had to have looked like a terrified deer in the headlights. I was shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone. There was a second man behind him I couldn't see as well. I have no idea what he looked like, but he was equally as tall and a bit more lanky than the larger man at the sliding glass door. I screamed, "Oh God, they're here!" And before the 911 operator could say anything, my 8-year-old cousin goes, "Mr. Jim?" His voice was very confused. It wasn't like my cousin was happy or even relieved to see him. I asked, "You know who that is?" But before my cousin can answer, I turned my attention to the man at the door. "I'm on the phone with the police!" I shouted. I'm grateful he didn't try that door because I don't think it was locked. The man stared at me hard for a moment, eyebrows furrowed, like deciding what he wanted to do next. But he then just backed away into the darkness. What seemed like an eternity later, I saw the truck lights back out of the driveway, and then back down the road until they disappeared. I was still scared shitless, and so was my cousin. He'd only met that guy a few times, an acquaintance of his dad. It wasn't like it was a close family friend, and obviously because again he went down the wrong driveway. Visitors never go down that way. The 911 operator asked for a description of the man, then told me they'd gotten in touch with my aunt and uncle and that they were on their way home. She stayed on the phone with me until a police officer showed up a bit later to make sure the men were gone, and they stayed with us until my aunt and uncle got home so they could ask us some questions. My uncle was furious, not at me for calling them home early, but at this Mr. Jim guy. He muttered something like, "I'm gonna fuck him up." My aunt was mad at my uncle and told him to tell Jim to never come back. I didn't know at the time, but my uncle had a drug problem. I don't know what Mr. Jim or his accomplice were doing, or what they would have done if I wasn't on the phone with the police, but that grin was not a friendly one. It was sinister. And again, he also had to have known my uncle was not there, because the basement was dark. He would have seen through the windowed basement door. He'd also tried lifting the garage door, something not even my uncle did. He intended to break into the basement, that much is clear to me. There's no other explanation. I never did babysit for them again, and I don't think I ever even went back up there because not long after, my aunt divorced my uncle and moved out. So, Mr. Jim, the grinning burly mountain man who tried to break into the house where I was babysitting, let's not meet again. Alright, place your bets now. Was there a meth lab in the basement? 100%, definitely, there was a meth lab in that basement. Our next story is from Miss Olagus. It wasn't a cat. A bit of preface here. I was around 10, 11 years old when this happened, old enough to stay home alone, but not old enough to recognize some red flags. I attended camp over the summer, the typical 8-free routine. My house sits close to the end of my street, which forms a U, but for some reason the bus driver would never drop me off at my house. I'd always get dropped off at the end of my street, where I would toddle myself along back home. Both my parents worked late hours, sometimes not getting home until about 8 p.m, and it would be very expensive to hire a babysitter for 4 or 5 hours a day, 5 days a week. So starting 6th grade, when the bus dropped me off at home, I would be by myself. I'd do the usual middle school routine, play games online, watch TV. Occasionally my neighbor's cat would come into the backyard and I'd feed and pet it as a way to get outside. The only computer in the house was in my dad's workroom, which has a window overlooking the deck and a window overlooking the side of the house. We have large bay windows in the living room, dining room and kitchen of my house, and since we sit on a hill, you can pretty much see the entire backyard from a very nice vantage point. So most days when I got home, I'd toss off my backpack and go right to that room, and you could see me walk from my front door and pop up by the computer from outside. Unfortunately, this would lead to something that I'd forgotten about until now. When I got off the bus, I did as expected. I go into my dad's workroom and play computer games. About 30 minutes into this, I can hear a faint meowing coming from outside the window. I pause the game and look outside, thinking maybe the neighbor's cat has wandered over. Nothing. I just sat back down and resumed playing, only to hear the meowing again. It was quiet, but noticeable, and so I checked the other window. Nothing again. This routine happened for a good 10 minutes, and eventually I got frustrated and went into the living room to watch TV. Not even 2 minutes later, meowing from the window I was sitting right beside. Now I was confused and a little creeped out, so I shut the blinds and kept trying to watch TV. The meows continued, but only when they came from the window right behind me did I jump and leave the living room, officially skeeved. I went into my bedroom, where the blinds were down but still cracked for some sunlight. I tried to read a book, only to hear a meow come from outside my bedroom window. This was enough to make me call my dad, concerned that maybe the cat was hurt, but I couldn't see it to be sure. He said he would have the neighbor come check it out and call me back later. 10 minutes go by, and I get a call from my dad saying he was coming home from work. Nothing urgent in his voice, just that his job had gotten cancelled and he needed to come home early. I thought nothing of it. And when he got home, I did realize the cat noise had stopped. Fast forward to the present, and I asked my dad about the strange incident, thinking it was funny the cat had followed me around. What he told me next made my blood run cold. After I called him, my neighbor did indeed come to check on the house. What he found were large footprints leading in circles all around the house, clustered close to the walls so that even if I looked outside, I wouldn't see anything. Someone had been stalking me through my house, seeing where I was through the windows and making cat noises to try and get me to come outside. They must have known I was home alone, since it was easy to see me walk by myself down the street and let myself in. My neighbor immediately called my dad and searched the property but found no one. The police weren't called since there was nothing but footprints that led off into the woods and got lost, and I never saw anyone. My dad stayed home with me for the rest of the week. It sickens me to know that there's people out there who would use these tactics to try and lure a kid out of their home, and from there, I don't know, do whatever they wanted to him. Well guys, thank you very much for listening. As always, Jesus Christ. Sorry, that last story caught me off guard a bit for some reason, I don't know why. Anyway, thanks for being here. I hope you enjoyed it. As always, I will see you in the next one.